There we go. First blooper in a while. So it's Thursday, July 30th, 2026. Welcome to episode 139 of the Driving Forward podcast. Whether you're joining us live or listening on one of our 18 platforms, including Reese Across America Radio, where we broadcast every Tuesday evening from 4 to 5 p.m. Central Time, we appreciate your support. Coming up in the next few, months at this point, but it's a busy couple of weeks here. We are at the 94th Minnesota Trucking Association Annual Conference. And it's one of my favorite events of the year, primarily because I've been involved with MTA now for, I think, 29 years in some way, shape, or form. A little more involved today than what I've ever been, but we love this conference. I think I'm headed up there on Monday to meet some people. If you're around Brainerd, Minnesota on Monday, the day before the conference starts, the day before golf, give us a call or shoot me a message, and I'd love to get together with everybody. We're going to set up a boat tour of the lake and go hit a few restaurants. Immediately following that, we have our GLCS Technology Summit, which I think we can go into the individual slides here as I'm talking to. If you run technology at a trucking company or freight brokerage, if you run a trucking company or a freight brokerage, there's a lot of CEOs coming. August 10th to 11th, the Technology Summit at the Sheraton Bloomington in Minnesota. Some people get confused because it's actually in Edina. We've had some questions, but if you look it up on Marriott, it's the Sheraton in Bloomington, Minnesota. It's going to be 2 days of 90-minute deep dives on all the stuff that keeps you up at night. Integrations, telematics, data you can't trust, cybersecurity, AI, vendor selection management, and what we're talking about today, implementation. It's the type of discussion, so we've tailored this, so it's the type of discussions that are going to leave you not only with some thoughts, but also some plans. So lots and lots of networking and discussion with people that make this stuff happen. You can sign up at glcs.net, or we'll provide a link in the comments as well. We have about 20 spots left, and when those are gone, you're probably only going to hear about this secondhand. We don't have much of a chance of expanding it, so it is what it is. Following that, we're at McLeod in Nashville, the Tennessee Trucking Association in Florida, which, that made me rethink if I'm going. And San Diego for Trimble Insight, and then capping off October with the ATA-MCE. Looking forward to that one. Lots coming up, lots going on. We're kind of everywhere. So we are scaling a few things back, but it seems like we're doing more than ever. So anyone who's been around transportation technology knows the dirty secret of the TMS world. So buying the software is the easy part. The projects that go sideways with blown timelines, busted budgets, and go lives that kind of grind the operation to a halt almost never fail because of the technology. It doesn't mean that they don't fail because of the technology, but they almost never fail just because of the technology. They fail because of the implementation, and that's what we're going to dig in today. I've got two guests who see this from both sides of the table. Brandon Hodges is the Executive Vice President at Mastery Logistics Systems, the team-building mastermind TMS, and he's spent more than 2 decades, of which I've known him most of that time, on the solutions side of transportation technology, including 15 years at TMW Systems and supply chain roles at Lamasoft, Coupa, and Resilink. I think that's how you pronounce that. I always get it wrong. He's watched implementation succeed and fail from the very first conversation through go live. And we also have Steve Harder. Steve is the VP of Technology for Contract Logistics and Ground at Crane Worldwide Logistics. Crane Worldwide Logistics is a global 3PL headquartered in Houston and operates in about 30 countries across air, ocean, ground, and contract logistics. Steve brings 30 years of IT leadership in supply chain to this conversation. He spent nearly 2 decades at DHL, Rising from IT program manager to senior IT director, he's led logistics technology transformation at Dupree Logistics and now runs the team at Crane, responsible for evaluating, selecting, and deploying the technology that keeps freight moving for customers around the world. So, in other words, Steve's the guy who actually has to live with these systems, integrate to these systems, and make them work how they're supposed to work every single day. So today we're going to get in that stuff that makes or breaks these projects: the phased rollouts versus big bang go lives, how to rack up incremental wins, and why internal champions and executive sponsorship matters more than any feature list. And how to handle the integrations that spiderweb and come with any enterprise system. So Brandon and Steve, welcome to the show. Appreciate you guys coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So we'll start with Brandon on this, but if you can give, I did a brief overview of who you are, where you came from, but if you could fill in some blanks there and give us a little more detail about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I didn't realize I was that old, being 20 plus years in this thing. It's actually going on 24. And before all of that, I started out driving a truck, believe it or not. I drove a truck around Texas and up to the Colorado area for a private fleet. And that's kind of where I got transportation in my blood. And also got a MIS degree from Texas A&M University. So lo and behold, I went into transportation technology. You did a great job talking about my first 15 years, TMW Systems, Trimble, held a variety of roles there. And just to kind of put a bow on that, I ended up in that role working in the energy, oil, and gas sector, and I helped them build that up. And they're still obviously a big player in the tanker business in general. Went over to Lamasoft and did a little bit different things, working with shippers, and continued that oil and gas focus for them. And through a variety of changes in the organization, ended up running sales for Coupa after they acquired Lamasoft for their supply chain design business. And then my last stop was a total divergence. I did supply chain risk management with a company called Resilink. You almost got it right. And what I was doing there was actually working with the U.S. government and other foreign governments. So got a chance to really see what bureaucracy looks like. So I would just say, with all that said, I'm very, very happy to be back where my roots are in the transportation space and working with a world-class company like Mastery of the TMS industry.
Perfect. Appreciate that detail. Steve, if you can answer that same question, kind of fill in the gaps on what I missed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nate, I wanted to start with just a big thank you on behalf of myself and Crane Worldwide for including us. It's a real honor and respect what you guys do here on the podcast. I did spend 20 years at DHL Supply Chain, working in different business units, implementing warehouse management, transportation management. Before I was there, I worked for 10 years in two different places for the same entrepreneur here in Columbus, and a guy named Jeff Wilkins, who actually started CompuServe. This is a quiz, like if anybody can remember CompuServe.
Oh yeah.
So he started CompuServe. I'm
not young.
Back in the day, and then he started a CD DVD manufacturing company called Meditech, which it's hard to imagine that was actually high tech back in the day, was sure. Manufacturing CDs and DVDs. But that's where I got my itch in supply chain and working with the technology that's the enabler, and kind of got my roots there. And then now at Crane Worldwide, working with the team, with Jared Crane and with Brandon and the leadership team there to help deliver our technology to align with our solutions. So it is really the opening on technology nowadays it's a game changer, right? Just the access to technology for even the small to mid-sized companies has been level the playing field, and so really excited to be here for today.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And to the point of technology, I think we continue to wonder where technology is going to stop becoming a differentiator and becoming a table stake. And I mean, the line continues to move, and it's moving so much faster than what it has ever moved before. And I was at TCA Refrigerated last week, and we were talking a little bit about that. On previously, if you had a visibility platform and a few things, people were happy with that. Now it's how fast can you get them the data, and how accurate is that data, and not touching or cleaning or having any opportunity to clean the data. So, every table stake continues to move forward. Technology's been like drinking from a fire hose here in our industry for the last really 15 plus years, but most certainly in the last 10. So, Steve, you've spent a long time doing this, and you spent a long time implementing software. Across all those implementations, what surprised you the most around the gaps between how the project look on paper initially and how they actually go?
Well, I mean, we always have a plan, and then that plan and the evolution of the plan is where the magic lives on the implementation. And so, I think to me, it starts with the executive support, like with the true sponsorship from CEO and the leadership and the executive teams, and then really when the rubber hits the road, that's where having a good alignment with all the stakeholders, because a good plan is going to evolve and shake out as we go, and so that's where the finesse meets with the structure, So I think having a plan that can evolve and to grow, I think that's what I've seen most. And anybody that thinks the plan's going to go perfectly is greatly mistaken, and being able to deal with the expected things that are going to come up. And that's I think where a good implementation, you just know things are going to happen. You just roll with it, and then you hit things head on as they come up. Working with the partners, on the vendor side, working with the partners on the operations and the business side, and just making sure that everybody hits things straight away that as they come up.
No, all fair points, and kind of looking at the champion side. But I'm going to present that first question to Brandon, and then kind of move on to a champion discussion. But Brandon, once again, across all the implementations you've been involved in, what surprises you, or on your end with how many you've probably worked with, what are you expecting between gaps of how a project may look on paper and how they actually go?
Yeah, I would say for me, when I first got started, I just expected everybody to fall in line with the plan. So it's a people surprise that I got, right? Because you have people at various levels of the organization that you expect to just say, yes, sir, salute, and go out and do. But you find a lot of folks just are very resistant to change in general. And you find certain folks that will find, overt ways and not so overt ways to slow or damage the project. But with that said, I've also found the biggest surprise to me was that the biggest skeptics often become your biggest allies. And the way that I've looked at that through this is you start pinpointing those skeptics, even in the sales process before the implementation starts, and you give those folks a big bear hug, because they're skeptics because they care, right? You're talking to those folks because they're not just going to ho-hum their way through it. They're really going to ask a lot of really deep questions, and that may challenge your planning and maybe even change your planning.
No, absolutely. So you kind of went down the way that my analogy to what you just said, and I actually just said this last week at Refrigerated as well during my session, is I categorize three people very early on, in the selection process, in the sales process. And those people are either the yes people that are going to do whatever you ask them to do, which are very positive people in many cases too, and they can be very helpful. On the same hand, they can be hurtful if they're always yes. Then you get the people who are on the fence, right? And they're going to sit there and wait to see which way the wind blows. And then you have those that are digging in and they don't want to change. Getting adoption and any sort of momentum from those who don't want to change first or early on actually pulls those people off the fence too as well. So you're absolutely correct in that assessment. So Steve, you mentioned internal champions or the champions of a project, any sort of executive sponsorship. What do you believe makes a good one? Is it, well, just generally speaking, what do you think makes a good executive or sponsor for a project? How do you find them? And then how do you ensure that they actually do what you need them to do?
Well, I mean, I think it starts truly with the top, and it's more by the actions than just the words. So that, like, if somebody's sponsoring a project, then to be able to trust that they're going to stand behind it, on all sides of it, from a financial and from a offering whatever it takes from a resourcing standpoint. It's sometimes it's easy to say that, but to actually action that and have that be real. That, I think, Nate, really cascades into the stakeholders that are on a project, right? So that the people that are living the project from a day-to-day standpoint, they know that their executive team and their sponsors and their partners are all singing the same tune that you're leading with. So I mean, to me, it starts with that executive sponsor, but then with that being a walk the walk versus just a talk the talk, then that becomes something that those people that are the naysayers or that are riding the fence, or even the ones that are always saying yes, that they all know what the end point is. And so I think it really cascades through that way. And then as far as like an implementation having a good culture fit, that's where I think having a partner that you kind of work through on the front side to make sure that you have a good you're thinking the same way for how things will run, and that you're going down that path together. This is the day and age where you have to have all hands, to drive a change and an implementation forward. And I think that's kind of the best way to approach it.
Understood. Brandon, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Steve said wholeheartedly. And I would just add that if you start out with the executive sponsorship's goals and metrics in mind, then come back to that throughout the project to make sure that they haven't changed. And whether they've changed or not, read back to them where you're seeing success. And that keeps that executive sponsor engaged and interested and hopefully feeling like they made the right decision. I had a mentor one time that said, nobody does what the boss doesn't measure. So if you have somebody there at the top that has those metrics that we all align to, then you just work with them to make sure we're hitting those numbers.
Something we do on a lot of projects is pull together more of an executive touch base. So we don't pull them into the details or even larger status update meetings. We'll do a half an hour at every various cadence, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever, depending upon what's required. But to ensure that we meet those metrics, and something that we coach the internal champions on is, if you're selecting a product to implement and you're not going to champion this, or you're not going to have someone that's passionate about it, you probably really need to look at the products you're championing or the products that you're going to implement. Because if executives are not going to step forward and take a role to ensure it gets deployed to their need, this is potentially not a product that you want, especially at the enterprise level. Obviously you get into smaller projects that are less impactful and don't require that type of oversight, but it still applies even when it's less impactful, because someone in the organization still is likely directly impacted by it. So, which if you guys have thoughts, just interject. Feel free. But Steve, you alluded to the change management side. Something we notate, the larger the organization, the more likely it's coming in as a line item on a project. But at the smaller organizations, it's one of the first things that gets stricken from a project. They don't necessarily need to manage change and adjust their organization for it. So what does real change management look like on like Steve, you're going through a TMS implementation right now. So what does the change management look like on that type of project? The actual work behind the change management.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all appreciate that change management it's not like an event that happens at the end of a project. It needs to be ingrained and a part of the lifeline of the project. So from the time it kicks off, until we're getting alignment on requirements, and then the technical design, and then the testing and the training, all of those aspects of the project need to have change management baked right into them, so that's just part of the process. And that's easy to say sometimes, but if you can live that, and you can have the change management be just part of the process, then you have a fighting chance. So that then when you get to that finish line, the actual, moving into production, starting to use the new system or the new technology out in the field, with drivers, with stations, then it's already been established. So yes, documentation is a big part of it, having SOPs and work instructions, but that's more just embedded into the process. So it becomes something that that everybody can kind of rally around and embrace, I think, Nate.
Oh, agreed. Having that change management champion, dependent upon the size of your organization as well, is wise. So someone that's they look at things differently. You as an IT leader, well, I'll use a generic IT leader instead of calling you out, Steve. But a generic IT leader is typically going to look at what does it take to get the solution in place from a task or a requirement standpoint, where they're aware of the human element, but this is someone who doesn't necessarily, they understand the requirements, but they're very aware of the human element. So change management's a big thing. The larger you get, the more important it is, but it is something that needs to be managed on an individual basis. There's no doubt about that. Brandon, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the way I define change management is changing someone's comfortable process for the sake of improving their workflow, for the sake of improving the business, right? So, when I think about that definition, when we come into an implementation, we have folks that will say it has to be done this way. And my first question is always why. I feel like a 2-year-old sometimes. I ask why a lot. Why is the sky blue? But I'm not trying to be annoying. I'm just trying to really get to the root cause of, okay, is it a customer requirement? Is it a corporate governance requirement or compliance requirement? Is it something that you're just used to, right? Because if it's something that you're just used to, the change management aspect from the technology provider, and Matcher does a great job of this, because everybody here is a practitioner. They've done it. They've been in the seat at very large carriers, very large brokers. So they can actually look at it from a business aspect and not just a software implementation aspect, and say, okay, I understand your why, but what if, that's the next question, what if we could make your life better doing it this way? And it's, a simple one is less clicks, but I think at the corporate level, at the going back to the executive sponsor for a minute, it's like, if I could get you 10 more loads per day per CSR, because I'm saving you these clicks or I'm saving these manual processes, wouldn't you like to make that process change? And that's kind of where my direction is, really just figuring out, because everybody has a reason for why they don't want to change. So if you're managing that change, you just got to get to that reason, get to that root cause.
And I think communicating that to an organization is extremely important. So if your entire organization is switching, some of those people need to be involved in selection and vetting the solutions. Then more need to understand, strategically why you're going, as you said. Some statistics on this, up to, and these are all soft numbers, but generally accepted, up to 70% of projects fail. Those that have leadership disconnect, that increases actually. So you have a 33% likelihood, if your leadership is disconnected, to simply fail, and that's an epic fail. So this is a very important metric to monitor. Only 20% generally of all projects epically fail, so they don't hit any sort of launch. So of that 70 that fail, it's typically missing a target, whether it's budget, time, or whatnot. So, but you look at that 33 percentile of having a champion on a project, extremely important. So that means you can go sideways pretty quick. So you also said something, and if you want to follow up on this one, users can kind of kill a project after go live by working around it. So to the ones that you struggle with, they'll find their own path that they're comfortable with. And I know in the beginning of my career, we'd see this happen all the time, at least on the tech side. How do you drive true adoption? And how do you measure it beyond just the user logging in? So that's for Brandon. I'll start there.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a bit of a shift in mentality, and I've seen this here recently with the way Mastery approaches it. Go live is not a line in the sand. It's not, okay, we're live, now you're in customer support, good luck. It is a consistent process, and we'll probably get into this in another part of this discussion, but we're not going live across the whole organization at Crane or really any of our customers. We're doing incremental go lives with direct payback, direct successes, and learning from each individual one. So that's the first part of that answer. But really, to drill into your direct question about people subverting the process, it comes back to the internal champions on the customer side or on the user side to hold those people accountable. And as you say, it's not just, are they logging into the system? It's, are they following the process? And we are actually using some technology that allows those people to get alerts if they're not. So that's kind of another, we're talking about the technical advancements, and it's not just, some of that stuff is table stakes. This to me is the next level, where you're able to go out and look at the actual points and clicks and processes that people are following and coach them. And it's not punitive. It's just making sure that they understand that the new process is there and how to follow it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that tech, and where I would say that we've looked at it a few times. On your end, it makes a ton of sense, where the complex implementations, being able to measure and manage that. Complete sense there. So Steve, what's your thoughts on that?
I think it starts with empowering the leads, so that this is their technology. This is not an IT, system. I mean, it is an IT system, but it's not for IT to run and operate. It's for the business to run and operate. So empowering the right mid-level folks to have ownership of that, I think is a big piece. And then I think following back with measurements and the data to, so that every day, every week, the management teams have the reports and the dashboards, right there in front of them, so that it's not a secret. You can see it right there, like, I'm using the system or I'm not, and then that can encourage the behavior right away, as opposed to just expecting that it's happening or counting on that it's happening. But I think it starts with empowering, the right level of leadership, and having that kind of mentality going in.
Yeah, great answer. And I mean, starting it out where it is the company's software, right? It's the ops team. It's the people it's the business, right? It's the people who are executing the processes. Something that I say over and over and over is this industry's evolved from trucking companies, brokerages, freight forwarders, etc., to now technology companies that move freight. There's so much technology that we're touching, and to think that an IT leader, they may own it from a line item standpoint, a budgetary item, but the business owns it ultimately and has to make the decisions to use it and use it properly and execute. If the business rejects, IT is not going to win that battle. There's no way. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in about a minute and a half. We're going to start talking a little bit about project management, integrations, implementation strategies, etc. So we'll try to get through as much as we can, but this could be a 4-hour discussion pretty easily. So we'll be back in a minute.
If your fleet's downtime looks like chaos, you're missing out on GLCS. In the time-critical world of trucking and logistics, every minute counts. Meet GLCS, your expert partner in managed IT and technology services. We integrate seamlessly with your team, bringing seasoned IT professionals with deep trucking and logistics expertise. Imagine your software updates running smoothly, complex issues resolved quickly, and operations humming with efficiency. GLCS has your back. Our support doesn't just fix problems, it prevents them with our industry connections and proactive approach. We keep your trucks rolling and your brokers working. Think of us as the added resource your company needs to unleash its full potential. Visit glcs.net today and keep your business driving forward. GLCS, where efficiency meets expertise.
All right, and we are back, refreshed, ready for the next 30 minutes. Let's talk project management. There's a school of thought that to Brandon's point, that best implementations are small or a string of small projects, visible wins rather than one giant, huge, big bang. So let's talk about an incremental win on a project like a TMS implementation. How do you go about that, Brandon?
Yeah, so I think in the design process and the initial conversations with the customer, you find the nagging pain points. Maybe not the biggest pain point, because sometimes that's you got to work up to that, but the nagging things that keep people up at night, and you try to figure out a way to architect that implementation to start solving those. And the way that we look at it at Mastery is, regardless of the size or complexity of the organization, there are segments, right? So it may be different lines of business. So you may have a direct over the road for hire line of business. You might have brokerage. You might have a dedicated line of business, and you may just start in one of those. Or if you're just one line of business, you would want to start in different functional areas. So by that, I mean, this is kind of going back to that nagging problem. I was talking to a prospect this morning, and they said, hey, we would really like to get our EDI percentage up. We're at like 5% EDI order acceptance, and we'd like to get that to 75%. And that's one of those nagging things. You go ding, ding, ding. Okay, let's work on that, and not try to completely uproot the back office out of the gate. So if we can really get your order capture side working well and say, okay, we hit that metric, and then everybody's happy and they can see how much time that's freeing up for customer service and even the planning side of things, because they're able to see all that data in the EDI, then they have that confidence that they can move forward into the back office side of things, or they can move forward into even the tracking and tracing side of things. So those are the types of things that we look for, is that nagging thing that, man, I really wish I could, and begin there.
So something that, I mean, when it comes to the smallest possible go live or smallest implementation you can do, our definition of it is we find the smallest autonomous denominator, within an organization. What is the smallest piece that we can impact first? And we learn a lot from that, and then you can go from there. Steve, so circling around that same statement, what's your thoughts on incremental go lives or phasing, a phased in approach?
I'm absolutely an advocate for phasing, and I think that the TMS space is one that fits quite well with that. There's some other, supply chain technologies that maybe kind of force more into a big bang, but TMS, to me, it just fits very well. And to me, for there's like a lot of folks that like to talk about the MVP and kind of getting that rolling first. To me, I think being able to have a piece of the business, going live end to end with all the functionality, but having the scope of that be limited to, a specific segment, division, or, station. I think that's really the best way to phase in, because it's getting people in and using the system in a live environment, but it's not exposing, large portion or chunk of the business. But then also, those folks can become the champions for the rest of the rollout and to build momentum around that. So, yes, there's a case for doing a piece of the business first, but to me, I like if you can do it end to end, but to have it be a smaller portion of the profile, if that makes sense. Is just, there's different ways to do that. I appreciate, but that's just kind of, I think, the best way, because then you have the most kind of end-to-end exposure to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an if then this that etc. sort of statement, where if you can find a complete autonomous piece of the business to roll out that's small enough to be impactful, makes a ton of sense. But sometimes you can't, so you end up having to parse it out even further, which doesn't give you for full life cycle of some things, but at least gets you a good portion of it. Some organizations just can't handle the end to end, or are not designed to do so. When it comes to project management, and this includes project plan, the entire life cycle of a project. If you look at good projects and those that you would deem successful, about 80% of them end up leaning into solid project managers. So this is another one on an enterprise level or at a larger company. There's no debate on the project, the need and value of a project manager. And as you go down market, they like to try to strike that line item, which is, in my mind, virtually impossible to lead a project without a project manager. There is no lead to the project, then you're accepting a pretty high percentage of failure. So who should actually run one of these projects? You have a vendor implementation team, you have a customer potentially implementation team. In some cases, you don't have that implementation team because an IT organization is meant to keep the lights on, not to continue to work with projects. Some people do have project teams. What does governance look like, and the person that runs this and everything like that? So I'm going to pass that to you first, Steve.
Yeah, I think there's definitely different approaches on who is actually running it. For Crane, we're leading that from our technology team. So the project manager does sit within our technology team, but then has a strong alliance with our business and finance teams as well. Having a direct connect with the partner on the TMS side. For TMS, it's so cross team oriented. So I think it's really important to have that, that open stakeholder, conversation, so that the project manager on a TMS project is really, an orchestrator, that is then pulling in all of the other work streams and other sides that go across the different domains. Even for Crane, it's because we touch so many different types of aspects in the supply chain that to cross into the other domains within, it's not an easy thing to tackle, but I think that's the finesse with the project manager, to be able to cross domains and to be able to then roll that back into the central piece. And I think having a good partner is just critical to it. I mean, maybe it goes without saying, but that's where having the right partner to go at it together, is critical to the overall success.
Yeah, if you're having to train your partner about what you do, you're going to have difficulty. So, and hopefully you're not dealing with a large, complex project. There's a lot of tech out there today, and it's very possible you're training that partner in many cases. But if it's a large TMS project, for example, if you have to start explaining your root business processes, there's wrong people involved right from the get-go. So
it's a really good point.
Brandon, what's your thoughts on who should actually run one of these projects and the accountability behind it?
Well, the first thing I would say, particular to the role of project manager, I think that should be a 2-in-the-box role every single time. We have an advocate on the customer side, an advocate on the vendor side, if you will, the TMS side, and they're working in tandem with one another to keep both teams on track. Because I think if you don't have, you're talking about striking something from the budget. If the customer doesn't budget internally for that role, then they don't have somebody marshaling their troops from their side, and those troops may not respect somebody from the outside, right? So I believe that, I guess I'll come back to your question. It has to be led in project management in terms of authority on the customer side, but you absolutely have to have an equivalent role for a project manager on the vendor side, so that they're marshaling their troops as well. And there's a lot of 2-in-the-box scenarios. When we deploy something, we have a team of a dozen people, and I'm looking at a list here of all the people that we deploy on a particular project. There's 7 dedicated roles, and then all the supporting roles underneath that. So you definitely have to have somebody to marshal all that, make sure those people are on time, make sure they get their jobs done, and the project goes well.
Yeah, I agree on the duality of it, right? There's a lot of dual roles. There's and on the customer end, on the shared customer end, they're the ultimate champion, but there's a lot of moving parts, right? Like your team as a solution provider knows what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to do it. And they're going to, if you could magically execute on the project plan you initially presented, you probably would have no problem with that. But then you have to deal with the human element of all the moving parts at a trucking company, brokerage, multimodal, 3PL, 4PL. So you and that's where projects become complex, is when you add in all the stuff to it. So if you just know you got to do this, and somebody shows up and does it and it's accepted, that's perfect. So that brings into just checking time, because I want to make time for the next topic. Scope creep. So when we're implementing a project, you have 10 requirements. 10 turns into 15, and every minute that you're on a phone, all of a sudden it's, oh yeah, we got to do this too. How do you hold the line on your scope when in something as large as a TMS implementation, when there's so many possible variations that you are moving forward with? So Brandon, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I would say scope creep is part of this business. You have to understand that as you get through these implementations, and especially if you do it incrementally, you're going to learn something new every time. And hopefully you learn less new things than the last one you did in the first one. But, we have to be nimble. And that's another great thing about Mastery, is that we don't have a bill by the hour model. We have a set implementation fee, and we work with the customer to stay on track, but we understand that there's creep. So I just wanted to say that is kind of a refreshing model. We don't want the customer to think, I can't tell them this thing because it's going to cost me more money. But with that being said, I believe that there are certain things, we go back to the asking the why question, right? There's certain things that people think they need that they don't really need, and they definitely don't need it right now, right? So it's all about dialogue and mutual respect, and having that at least community between those two roles and those two organizations to say, gosh, guys, I mean, if we do it this way, it may not cost you more money, but it's going to cost you more time. And that may be one of those 70% failures because it's not going to hit the go live date.
And I'll throw out there, if it's costing you time, it's costing you money. There's no way any project that extends in time is going to burn a certain amount of dollars on a weekly basis, even if you take it to a close to idle rate. So if you extend that project 6 months, your budget's going with it. So Steve, thoughts on scope creep?
Yeah, just briefly that the scope conversation can become very disruptive and an interruption. And so just identifying that in the larger group meetings and say, okay, let's have a breakout. Let's hit this, head on, but let's do it with a smaller group and then come back with, the impact, whether that's time, cost, or, alternative, short-term, long-term, but just not getting bogged down because, the scope conversations can just grind things to a halt if you let it, but, not ignoring it, saying, okay, let's carve this off and let's bring it back together. And then that, is a good way to kind of drive consensus, so it gives some empowering, but then it brings it back together so that, if it's warranted to change the scope, then let's do it. But otherwise, let's look at alternatives and move on. So that's kind of my thought there.
Yeah, valid points. So I want to spend probably the rest of the time, with the exception of maybe one question, on integrations and the capability to connect systems. So no TMS really lives alone. It needs to talk to your ERP, your WMS, your visibility platforms, customer systems, freight audit. I mean, I can keep going on. Is integration, or what? First off, I already know maybe some of these answers, but how important is integration to you? And is it now a very large chunk of the work when you're implementing a TMS, or what's your thoughts on how you kind of scope that out? So there's like 3 questions in there, Steve, but I'm tossing that one to you.
Yeah, huge part of the decision point for us was the, kind of the architecture around integration, and just, old school back in the day, the TMS was, kind of trying to cover all the functionality within that space. And that, of course, that model has completely changed. And so, like you said, I mean, the integration is what it's all about, because there's so many niche extension utilities that really fit the market so well. Like that, I'm sure you talk to them, every day and every week, but that's really, being able to plug those guys in, and like the more that's out of the box with being able to leverage that core TMS, the APIs that are out there, the more attractive it is for, especially for a third party that, that wants to be able to plug and play. We know that you can't just turn everything on day one with integration, but the more that's there, and just all those hooks that are out there with all those extending systems, is really the game changer, to be able to run fast in this, very fast space that we're in. So to me, integration is a game changer, and be able to plug things in quickly is where it's at. So,
Brandon, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I take integration in 3 different categories. You have your legacy table stakes integrations. You have to hook up to the ELD. You have to hook up to EDI. You have to hook up to maintenance. You have to hook up to some sort of a GL accounting system. So those are all things that we try to make as seamless as possible, because we have the dedicated integration collect connection station, and we just want you to be able to plug in your credentials and have those work. But again, that's the table stakes. That's the starting off point. With all the emerging technology around AI, dashboarding, the ability to communicate outside of EDI, because EDI is the most non-standard standard in the industry, right?
Yeah.
Those are things that are really exciting to me in terms of making it more flexible, right? Because I don't want to just pigeonhole you into those standard integrations where you just plug and play your credentials. I want you to have some future proofing capabilities to go and get in touch with those higher end solutions or niche solutions, or even in your own internal environment, right? So what's really cool about the integration as it's evolved in all of technology is, if you're architected correctly, you don't just have just even APIs. Like, we can even go to Kafka events, if those tech nerds are out there listening, right?
Yep.
It's even more more frequent and more specific than an API that's synchronous, right? So those are the types of things that really get me excited, because I listen to a bunch of podcasts around different technologies, and I know Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, said, I'm going to have the very first headless CRM system. It's just going to be something in the background. You can hook up to it however you want. And the only way you can do that is through those novel integration capabilities. So, imagine a day when you can just say to your phone, book me a load from Dallas to Chicago, and put Joe Wilson on it as the driver, and you're done. You can only do that through those integration capabilities.
Yeah, so the technology behind the API. So API and EDI are actually as old as each other. They started in the 40s. Actually, I think EDI came later. So, but the concept of an API started I think it first was deployed in the late 40s. So, and API, application programming interface, which it's hard to think back technology-wise, like there's something we're using today conceptually that was brought about actually it was the late 60s. It wasn't the concept was built in the 40s. But you look at what's possible with the concept of APIs today and where it may go, and it gets kind of scary, to be honest with you. But to be honest with you, one of the things that we're vetting with most of our customers when we're looking at new solutions, especially for the more advanced customers, and our customers, typically the truck line and brokerage, is, can we access the vast majority of that TMS data through API? Can we impact the TMS in all aspects via API? And if you can't, the data model of old, of being a legacy, SQL database or whatever, where you could perform whatever you wanted against it, becomes difficult. You still need to be able to do that in the future, right? And the technology that's coming down the pipeline in advancement of these APIs is interesting. So, I hear API 400 million times a day, and the API of old versus what's coming out now versus what's coming out probably just a year from now are going to be entirely different. They're much easier to work with if the system is flexing to work with it. I actually put in my opinion, when we're selecting software for a mid-market or larger organization, connectability, so being able to integrate to other systems, is probably the highest requirement, generally speaking. And to your point, Brandon, the AI layers coming in, you can't even start to guess what they're going to want to do. So they're going to want to do everything eventually. So,
and they're really hungry. They take a lot of processing power, and they take a lot of money in the token usage. So to be able to have that direct connection into your architecture, not just your database, but your data structure, helps alleviate some of that cost and make it faster too.
So anything else on integrations you guys can think of that we need to chat about? I'm sure, this is one of those where we can talk probably for hours and hours upon, but anything, we have one question after this one and before we're up on time. So any thoughts on integrations kind of in closing?
I think you covered it. I think there's just so much opportunity for automation, and that is, like you said, is enabled by the advancement in APIs. Just what used to take 23 steps, now can take 2 steps, and then there's a bunch of calls and automation that happens in between, and it's amazing, honestly, the advancements that have happened in the last 5 years. So, but I think you said it very well, Nate.
I appreciate that. All right, last one for both of you. For the shipper, the carrier, the 3PL, the broker listening right now, who is starting down a TMS implementation, or who is staring down, I guess, a TMS implementation in the next 12 to 24 months. What is one piece of advice that you'd give them so they end up in their project ends up in the successful column? Brandon, you wanna take that one?
Yeah, and I'm gonna do you one better, right? So the way I look at it is success in all the successful implementations I've been a part of in any different category or industry. They had 2 themes: communication and good governance, right? We're always in communication. We're not scared to talk to one another. We have a good relationship where it's not a vendor customer relationship, it's a partnership relationship. And the governance to control those things like scope creep and change management, et cetera. So that's the success. And I would also add that the 2 common themes in failed implementations is fear and lack of executive oversight and lack of executive involvement, right? So it's one thing for the executive to write the check and say, you guys go get it. And it's another thing for the executive to be looped back in on a periodic basis and drive the change management within his organization or her organization, because that's the end game, right? So I have to tell this one horror story that did not happen in the recent past, but it happened in my past, where I was working with the CEO of a very large trucking firm, and he did what I just said. He signed the check and he walked away, and we got through the go live, and it happened to be a big bang. And this guy called me 2 weeks later, literally in tears, because he couldn't pay his drivers. He couldn't bill his customers. He'd run out of his line of credit. And as you said at the very outset of this podcast, Nate, it wasn't the technology that caused that. It was lack of preparation and follow through in the implementation. And they just rammed it through and said, hey, we're going to go live because we said we're going to go live. And then he had a much bigger problem on his hands. So I don't want to leave this on a negative note, but that's the thing that happens if you don't follow the successful model of communication and governance, and I must add, incremental go lives.
Great points, and I agree across the board. Steve, any comments on this?
Yeah, mine would be pretty simple. Is even though we all know better, don't rush the requirements. It's easy to say that, but spend the time on process, spend the time on documenting and putting pen to paper on what the requirements are, and let AI do all that for you as far as filling in the boxes. But even I, like as a technology leader, I want to go fast, but don't rush the requirements, because then and we all know it, but it's a habit. Like once you kick off a project, that you want to just get on with all the other steps of the project. But that would be my one shining piece to bring back with the team.
You took the words out of my mouth. That's pretty much what I was going to say, is know what you're wanting to achieve as a successful go live, which largely is driven by requirements. I mean, if you paint a picture as an organization of we want to achieve this, and this is what we call a successful go live. And you've done all your due diligence to ensure that your requirements are met, and you've done the alpha to Zulu testing throughout. If you're doing a UAT portion or user acceptance testing portion of a project, you should be good. You're setting up a good foundation there. But if you start a project and don't know what you're trying to achieve and don't document that, now it's obscure. Now what exactly is a successful project? No one's determined what that is, and you've gone down the path. And I think, unfortunately, in our industry, probably 9 or 95 out of 100 companies do that. They don't really well define what a successful go live looks like. The larger companies are more likely to build charters and whatnot, but all fair points. So, gentlemen, I appreciate you coming on today. This has been a good discussion. It went by extremely fast. Steve, if someone wants to reach out to you or know more about Crane Worldwide Logistics, where can they reach you, or how can they look you guys up?
Either through our website, Crane, www.com on the screen, or can hit me on LinkedIn directly, and I can pass you along to the right contacts.
Brandon, same question for you.
Yeah, website for Mastery is mastery.net, and I am on LinkedIn, and you can also email me at brandon.hodges@mastery.net. Any one of those methods. And I did share a implementation playbook.
Bingo.
That will probably be in the show notes if you want to get some more details around kind of our processes.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Check out that link. It'll be in the comments wherever you're listening to this on. Just click on it and you can scroll through. So, gentlemen, once again, I appreciate you coming on. It's been great chatting about this. Look forward to future discussions.
Great.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Huge thank you to Brandon Hodges of Mastery Logistics and Steve Harder of Crane Worldwide Logistics for pulling back the curtain on what it really takes to implement an enterprise TMS. The incremental wins, the phased versus big bang decision, the champions and sponsors who carry these projects, and the integration work that ties it all together. But here's the thing I want to leave you with. We spent this whole episode talking about software, and the truth is, none of this is really truly about software. A TMS implementation is about people, and I think we kept touching on that over and over. But it truly is just about people. Assuming you've selected the technology properly, it's from that point on about the people. It's the dispatcher who's done it her way for 20 years, staring at a new screen and wondering if her job is going to be here tomorrow. In some cases, the technology shifts substantially. It's an analyst staying late at night to scrub location data through the project to ensure you have that right. It's the project manager who's stressing out before a cutover and running through that checklist one more time. Those are the people that decide whether projects live or die. And when a go live lands clean, when the freight keeps moving and the phones stay quiet, and that skeptical dispatcher becomes your loudest champion, that's not all the software. It's a people win. So it's certainly, kudos to the software solution and all involved, but it's ultimately a people win. So remember what Steve and Brandon said today. Bet on your people first, and the technology will follow. Stay curious, stay informed, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Until next time, drive forward with purpose and innovation. Thanks for watching.